An elderly lady called Grandma Moses lived till 101 years old. She once said, "I look back on my life like a good day's work. It is done and I am satisfied with it." How simple could that be? Just acknowledging your positive past. Most people in our culture remember their failures more than their successes. One reason is the leave them alone pounce approach to parenting, teaching, and management that is so prevalent in our culture. When you were young, your parents left you alone when you were playing and being cooperative. And then they pounced on you when you made too much noise, were a nuisance, or got into trouble. You probably received a perfunctory good job when you got, as you got a huge lecture if you got C's and D's and, God forbid, E's and F's at school. So in school, most of our teachers marked our answers with wrong with an X, rather than marking the ones we got right with a check mark or a star. In sports, we got yelled at when we dropped the ball in football or baseball or rugby. There are almost more emotionally intense ways around errors and failures and mistakes than there are around your successes. And it's that emotional intensity around these failures, it solidifies all these emotions connected with these failures. So because the brain more easily remembers events when they're accompanied by strong emotions, most people underestimate and underappreciate the number of successes they've compared with the number of failures they've had. One of the ways to counteract this phenomenon is to continue to consciously focus and celebrate your successes when they actually happen, even small successes. One of the exercises that Jack Canfield does at his corporate seminars is to have participants each share the successes that they've had in the past week. It's always amazing to see how difficult it is for people to actually share those successes. We tend not to remember that. We tend to remember a lot of our failures. Many people don't think they've had any successes at all, but they can easily tell you 10 ways that they've messed up in the last 7 days, but have a much harder telling you 10 victories that they've had. The sad truth is that we all have many more victories than we have failures. It's just that we set the bar far too high as to what we call success. A participant in his opportunity, as Jack Canfield calls his goals. Now, this stands for gaining opportunities and life skills. This is short for that, so it's called goals. It's a program he developed to get people of welfare in California, and it actually asserted that they didn't have any successes, these people that were on it. When he inquired about one of the guy's accents, because he insisted he hadn't had any successes at all in his journey through life, he had told us that he had left Iran when the Shia toppled it in 1979. He had moved his whole family to Germany, where they had learned German and he had become a car mechanic. And more recently, he had emigrated his whole family to the United States. And he had learned English and is now in a program learning to be a welder. But he actually didn't think he had any successes at all in his whole life. Wow. When he asked the group what they thought successes was, they thought it was actually owning a Beverly Hills house and a mansion or driving a Cadillac. They looked at all the material things in life. They'd never looked at what their journey was and what they'd done throughout that. So in his mind, anything less, this is this guy, but the Cadillac and the Beverly Hills home, anything less was not an achievement. Slowly, with a little coaching, he began to see that the many successful experiences every single week he'd had, simple things such as getting to work on time, getting into the goals program that Jack had developed, learning to speak English, providing for his family, and buying his daughter her first bicycle were all successes. He had worked for the money to buy his daughter that bicycle. That was a success. But we don't, as a society, look on that as successes. It's crazy. We program our mind for failure. because we look at the negative aspects all the time and work in a correctional society. So this is the poker chip theory of our self-esteem and successes. So why am I making such a big deal about acknowledging your past successes? The reason is it's important because its impact on your self-esteem itself. Imagine for the moment that your self-esteem is like a stack of poker chips. Then imagine that you and I are playing a game of poker, and you have 10 chips and I have 200 chips. Who do you think is going to play more conservatively in this game of poker? Carefully. Yes, probably you are. Because if you lose 2 bets of 5 chips, you're out of the game. I can lose 5 chips and 40 times before I'm out of the game. So I'm going to take a lot more risks, and because I can afford to take the losses. Your level of self-esteem works in exactly the same way. The more your self-esteem you have, the more risks you'll be willing to take. Research has shown over and over again that the more you acknowledge your past successes, the more confident you become in taking on and successfully accomplishing new ones. You know that even if you fail, it won't destroy you because your self-esteem is so high. You know you'll bounce back. And the more risk you take, the more in life you'll win. The more shots you take, the more chances you have of scoring. That's it. Good morning, Alana. Good morning, Anne-Marie. Knowing that you have successes in the past will give you the self-confidence that you have the more successes in the future. So let's look at the simple and powerful ways to build and maintain high levels of self-confidence and self-esteem. So begin with 9 major successes. Here's a simple way. Just take an inventory of the major successes. Consider having your spouse or your partner or your family do the exercise too. Start dividing your life into 3 equal time periods. For example, if you're 45 years old, your 3 time periods could be from birth to 15, 16 to 30, and 31 to 45. Then list the 3 successes you've had in each time period to help you get started. Here's some of my own. So from birth to the age of 23, I was the house captain at school. I met my wife Elaine. I was the top achiever for 3 years at Fife College. So my second time period from 24 to 40. I was a company director before I was 29, a financial director. I started 5 properties. I retired at 38 years old, financially free, never to work for anyone else ever again. My last time period, from 40 to now, I was the number 1 letting agent in Scotland. I was the number 1 estate agent in Scotland. And I started 2 online shows, the Fife Property Show and the Sunday Slot, and started broadcasting. And that's how simple these successes can be. And you need to do that as well if you want to have your self-esteem. It's all about building your self-esteem and making sure your self-esteem is so high that if you take the knocks now and again, it doesn't affect you that much. Remember the poker game I was talking about. Remember the fact if you only got 10 chips, you can only do 2 sets of 5. If you've got 200 chips, which is your self-esteem, and you've built it so high, you can afford to take the losses because you know the wins will happen as a result. And I'll see you tomorrow.